Hi, I'm Brandon Dale with Dual Controllers, and this week
we interrupt this episode of Dual Controllers to bring you this special news bulletin. The world is ending!
The first game we're going to take a look at, nobody really saw coming because of its unconventional release. But since its release, it has not only gained a large fandom, but critical acclaim. I'm talking about The Walking Dead. And no, not the Dixon video game. I'm talking about The Walking Dead, the episodic series. The Walking Dead is a graphic adventure played in third-person perspective with a variety of cinematic camera angles, in which the player, as protagonist Lee Everett, works with a ragtag group of survivors to stay alive in the midst of a zombie apocalypse. Throughout the game, the player is presented with the ability to interact with the surroundings, and options to determine the nature of those interactions. Some conversation trees require the player to make a selection within a limited time, otherwise, Lee will remain quiet, which can affect how the characters respond to him. Unlike other RPGs such as Mass Effect or Fallout, where the choice is either on a good or evil scale, the choices in The Walking Dead have an ambiguous result, having only the effect and the attitude of the non-player characters towards Lee. A somewhat sequel, The Walking Dead 400 Days, is an additional episode released in July of 2013 as a downloadable content for the first game as sort of a bridge for the gap between this season's and the game's sequel. It focuses on 5 new characters during the first 400 days of the zombie outbreak. The story is presented in a non-linear narrative style, with the final sequence summarizing the results of the game with the interactions between the 5 players. The player can approach the 5 stories in any order they choose. The next game we're going to take a look at, a lot of other people didn't see coming either. But after its release, it was given critical acclaim for its richly deep characters. I'm talking about Last of Us. Last of Us takes place in the United States 20 years after a fungal spore-based infection rapidly spread across the globe, wiping out a vast majority of the population by warping its host brains and turning them into deadly predators capable of killing in a single bite. The remnants of the world's population has been reduced to either struggling survivors or ravenous infected mutants. The 2 main characters are Joel, a survivor of the fungal pandemic, and Ellie, a 14-year-old orphan who has grown up in the post-apocalyptic world. Last of Us uses third-person perspective, involving gunfights and melee combat, and a cover system. For most of the game, the player controls Joel. Ellie and other companions are controlled by AI. The player must move throughout the post-apocalyptic world, fighting off infected and the gangs of the hostile human survivors. Typically, the player can attack enemies directly or use stealth tactics to pass undetected. To defeat enemies, players can use long weapons such as rifles, shotguns, and bows, or short-barreled guns such as pistols and revolvers. They can also scavenge limited-use melee weapons such as pipes and baseball bats. Bottles and bricks can be thrown to distract, stun, or attack enemies. Weapons can be upgraded using collectible parts at workbenches, and Joel's physical abilities, such as the health bar and crafting speed, can be upgraded by collecting pills and medical plants. On November 25, 2013, Sony registered a domain name that suggested a film version of Last of Us may be made. And it was confirmed on March 13th of 2014 that a film will be based on the video game storyline. Well, that does it for my first segment, so I'm going to pass it over to Dylan and we're going to see how Dystopian did it up in the retro.
For retro games, the first game we're going to talk about is Beneath a Steel Sky. Released in 1994 by Revolution Software, this game follows the adventures of Robert in a cyberpunk science fiction point-and-click adventure dystopian game. He must defeat the all-powerful computer Linux in order to save humanity. Often called the 1984 of the computer game generation, the game saw a sequel, a freeware release, and a remastered edition years later. The next game on our list doesn't necessarily take place in dystopia, but those elements are there, and that game is Chrono Trigger. Now, while it doesn't take place solely in a dystopian setting, as I said, the game does involve time travel. In the game, the player and his party can travel to a dystopian future caused by lavas. It becomes the player's mission to go back in time to prevent this future from ever coming to be.
Great Scott, this is heavy!
Another retro game for the dystopian setting would be a game called Robotica. Released in 1995, the player battles through the Dust space station in a rebellion against the government, after several peacekeeping unions, such as the US and Europe, collapsed due to global tensions, thus forming the world's silent security service. Equipped with mech armor and various weapons, the player must defeat Dust in order to save humanity itself. The next game we're going to look at is a game called Forsaken, released on the PC and the PlayStation. Released in 1998, this game takes place in a setting where technology has exceeded beyond humanity's control, and various raider groups must battle to salvage what remains of the dead planet. The game is primarily a first-person multiplayer shooter, allowing for multiple players to be on each team as you battle for the resources that remain on Earth. Well, that's it for the retro side of dystopian future games, and we're going to segue to our very special guest, Ethan Taylor. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to go eat some food that I salvaged from my own resources, and it's about to go bad.
Now, the first game I'll be talking about is Dark Souls, a game that's smash breakout hit, advertised to be one of the hardest games you'll ever play in your entire life. To explain the plot, I'll have to go through some of the lore. When the world began, it was shrouded in fog. It was very unformed. The only thing that really existed were the everlasting dragons. And then there was fire. And with fire came disparity, and disparity, is not good. It's life, death, heat, cold. And a lot of the central themes of this game actually surround with fire, which is actually really interesting. Fire itself represents life, represents the continuation of life. There's a fire inside of you, when that goes out, then you die, that type deal. Then, shortly after the fire came, then the humans came, and they were sick and tired of being cold because those jerk dragons were hogging all the fire, that they decided that it would be a good idea to rise up and fight them. So what they did was, they found these things called Lord Souls, and Lord Souls are... They're the souls of lords, and these souls are very powerful. So the first characters of this game put them inside of themselves. So you got Lord Gwyn. He's the Lord of Sunlight, and he invented the Sunlight Spear, which is a very, very powerful spell. And then you have the Witch of Izalith, who is the mother of pyromancy and the mother of chaos. What she was able to do was she conjured great firestorms and burned the enemies. With their scales off, this hurt them greatly. And now you have, the next one is Grave Lord Nito, the first of the dead. He used his Lord Soul to unleash miasmas of death and disease across them, thereby finishing off the Everlasting Dragons. When Lords defeated the Everlasting Dragons, they kind of screwed themselves over. They created something called the Curse of the Undead by doing that. The Curse of the Undead goes along with a Dark Sign. The Dark Sign is a brand that's given to all undead. And what it means is you're able to live again, but someday you're going to go crazy and become a hollow. And hollows are bad news, because hollows they're shells without any humanity at all. Another thing that's cool about this is that it has lots of different things that you can do. Like you can do drop attacks, you can two-hand your weapon and then do more damage that way. And they have heavy weapons, light weapons, and all different kinds of movement systems, which makes it really cool. It's probably one of the best combat systems I've seen in the game so far. Well, DayZ, I'm talking about the standalone, not the mod. DayZ is a zombie survival simulator. The reason why I call it a simulator is because it's not really a game. You have, you can bleed, you can get sick, you have thirst, hunger, you can starve, things like that. It's actually a really well implemented system, and it allows you to create this kind of level of realism that you really don't find in games very often today. And it's pretty cool. It actually allows you to have a lot of cool interaction. So, the next game is State of Decay. Another zombie game. Hooray! State of Decay is an open world zombie game that has a lot of cool features in it. Like you can scout, you can scavenge, you have central bases that you can bring things back to, you can have friends that you can switch between, you have skills, it has RPG elements in it, a plethora of weapons that you can use, all with different stats, swing speeds, amount of damage, durability, all kinds of crazy stuff. And each character, depending on how, you can have a character that's exhausted. If you run around too much, or if you swing a weapon too much, you can get tired, and that lowers your overall stamina. If you get hurt too much, that lowers your overall health to the point where you can either be injured, severely wounded, or mauled. Mauled meaning that you can't get up. And there are tons of different zombies that you find. You have the standard zombies, and you have things called the big uns, which are basically just big fat zombies, look kind of country. And then you have ferals, which are really kind of short-looking, like kind of stout zombies that have big muscles. Now, this entire game is set in the area of Trimdale County. Trimdale County is a big area that has a couple towns in it. You're going down there for a vacation. You like to get away from the city life. Well, you go out to the country, and you find out it's full of zombies. So, hooray! That's the plot of the game. And from then, it's just straight up survival. Now, continuing off of Brandon's train that he had earlier, I'm doing Last of Us Left Behind. It takes place in the middle of the story, in between the seasons of fall and winter, where there's that big blank spot. You're playing as Ellie during that period of time. Throughout the DLC, she reminisces back to her interactions with her friend Riley. Basically the last night before she was bitten. It shows them doing things together. As the DLC progresses, Ellie's going to be making progress in the real world, and Ellie's also going to be making progress in her reminiscing. And the entire DLC ends in a way that I'm not going to spoil it to you, but I'm pretty sure you all know how it ends. I'll see you later, guys. I'm going to pass it off to Brandon so he can finish up his segment.
The next game we're going to take a look at hasn't actually come out yet, and it won't come out for a couple months. But I'm really pumped about this game because it's our first look at what a zombie RPG game might be like for consoles. Imagine what Dead Island could have been like instead of what it was. I'm talking about Dying Light. Dying Light contains a dynamic new day-night cycle. During the day, the player has to go out and scavenge for supplies to send back to the safe zones. They can also set traps, save random survivors, and make their way to airdrops. The infected are slow, allowing the players to simply make their way past them, but their danger grows in numbers. Yeah, that's the thing with zombies. Luckily, the player can stay on rooftops of buildings to stay out of harm's way. When the sun goes down in Dying Light, the infected transform into something more dangerous. They gain the ability to sprint after the player. They have increased damage, as well as the ability to jump and climb on buildings like the player. In order for the player to avoid contact, they need to use their night sense to locate the zombies in the dark and stay out of their way. Players can use sound to lure zombies, but when night comes, so do the Night Hunter, or Volatile. It is a rare special type of infected that only comes out at night. If spotted by this infected, escape is almost impossible. In order to escape them, the player will have to use tactics, distractions, or the night sense to survive until morning. Dying Light started out as a Dead Island sequel, but Techland made it into a completely new video game because of its completely brand new features such as a massive open world, new zombies, real-time day-in-life sequences, better graphics, new game mechanics, and much, much more. Also promising that many of the bugs from Dead Island will be fixed. Thank you. The next game we're going to take a look at is actually one of the best dystopian society games out of this generation. Mostly because it doesn't involve zombies. I'm talking about Borderlands. Borderlands is set on the planet of Pandora, lured by its apparent vast deposits of minerals, several colonized ships sponsored by the Dole Corporation, one of several diversified megacorporations that appear to control and govern the entire planet. The mining operations are cost-effectively manned by large amounts of convict labor brought to the planet by Dole. At the start of the game, players select one of 4 characters, each with unique skills and preferences with certain weapons. From then on, players take on missions assigned to them through non-player characters or from bounty boards, each typically rewarding the player with experience points, money, and sometimes a reward item. Players earn experience by killing both human and non-human foes, and completing in-game challenges, such as getting a certain number of kills using a specific type of weapon. As they gain levels from experience growth, players can then advocate skill points into skill trees that features 3 distinct specializations of the base character. Borderlands was so successful that it spawned a sequel, still taking place on Pandora, but with new characters and new weapons and skills for them to unlock. And maybe a threequel. Maybe. We don't know.
War never changes.
Threat in the city. Nest teams are on site and attempting to disarm. I repeat.
The world is ending!
05409 on station. Everyone, hang on.
The apocalypse was simply the prologue to another bloody chapter of human history.